Hello and welcome everyone to the main event this week. I'm Meeta and I'm joined by our special guest today, Tosh Paul-Patia. Hi, Tosh. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Meeta. Yourself?
Yeah, really good. Good to be on live and direct with our audience today, the last before Christmas.
Yep, I've even got my Christmas tie on. I don't know if it's a Christmas tie at all, but got to smarten up for the event, Meeta.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And not only thank you for turning up all zhuzhed up, but have you got your own Christmas party to be going to? Is that what this whole affair is about?
No, not today. Not today, anyway.
Well, we're going to be talking Christmas parties today, aren't we?
Yeah. We're talking about a few interesting topics. In fact, three things.
Yeah.
The first thing was about Christmas party nightmares. And I think we've got a few surprises that might make people not to be scared about the Christmas party, but just be aware of it. And if you're an employer looking at these things, maybe have a word with your staff before everyone goes out on a jolly and then regrets it. Is one thing.
Yeah, I mean, everyone goes into Christmas parties with all this, the business and the employers and HR, they want to create this great environment, especially because it's probably the first time in 3 years that people have actually all got together. But there can be some mishaps and challenges that then have to be dealt with. So we're going to be talking about that.
People behaviours and all sorts of things that can cause issues. We'll get into that. We're also going to talk about the new flexible working laws that are. It's a bill at the moment. It's not a new law at the moment. So it's a proposal.
But it's a popular one, isn't it? It's probably not going to have any challenges, and it probably will come in as law pretty soon.
I think it will make a big difference going forwards for employers significantly. So we'll go through that as well.
That'll be good. And then the final topic is all about unconscious bias. And we actually started by covering the Buckingham Palace situation when a guest was approached and almost she felt attacked by the questions that were asked and the way they were asked. She felt it was racist. But actually, you want to take this further, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, probably I don't know if you've watched it. I've been watching the Harry and Meghan Netflix program series, and it's an interesting take on things. And also that is to do with unconscious bias. At least that's what Harry and Meghan are sort of raising. Yeah, and it's controversial, no doubt. I'm sure everybody's got an opinion on it. I do too. Is there an element of it? Maybe. Is it other factors? Probably. But we'll get into that because that obviously directly relates to what we're talking about in the workplace as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that unconscious bias is inherent in everyone, regardless of what race, color, background, and we have to raise self-awareness to be able to overcome the impact it's having. I think that's all that Harry is talking about, and you're right. They're Marmite, right? You love them or hate them, but there are some really important lessons to learn from them, from the Buckingham Palace rows. So what I thought we could do for the next 40 minutes, up to about 1:45, no later, is have a festive, interactive session where our attendees bring their thoughts, questions, and ideas to the chat box. You and I, we always have a lot to say anyway, but hopefully if you're watching and you have something you want to address, a problem you want solved, or just a comment you want to get out there, then pop it into our chat box. I've already put a little comment in there, and it's really super easy. And you could even do it privately if you don't want to have your name up there, and it's literally as easy as that. So I'm saying hi to everyone. I've also got a poll that would really appreciate you putting your thoughts into, because not only are we looking at tying up the webinar series this year with a bit of a gift, a bit of insight into what you should be thinking about around your people and strategies for next year. But also we want to understand what you're thinking about. So the question on this poll the questions are, what people challenges are you most concerned about for 2023? And from that, we will then publish it at the end, and we will take your thoughts and questions and answers, Tosh, look at me. And we will put the solutions into future webinars. Or we are also available outside. So if we don't get to answer all the questions in the time allocated today, Tosh and I are available on LinkedIn. You will get a recording at the end of this session, which will have our contact details, our mobile numbers. We are here to help, and we like to get into the nitty-gritty of what challenges you're facing, because there's always a solution.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is about, it can be whatever you want it to be, right? But you and I, Meeta, have always intended this to be an interactive session to deal with real problems that you're facing. And we have always said, not some sort of stuff out of a textbook, some sort of ivory tower advice.
Yeah.
We've been rolling up our sleeves and working in the trenches for over 25 years, and we want to impart that on you in this free webinar. So it would be silly not to use that information. That doesn't mean it has to be about today's topic. Even if there's something that you're really facing, you've got a question, put it in there. We're going to obviously address that for you, and I think you might surprise you. We all think the way we think, right? So sometimes getting a different perspective on a situation from an expert that deals with these, or experts that deal with these types of things, is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, indeed. So the 4 areas we were looking at were finding the right people, retaining and motivating people, restructures and redundancies, or engagement and productivity. And interestingly, at the moment, the most popular is retaining and motivating people. So let's see how that changes over the course of the session. But in the meantime, shall we dig into the detail, Tosh? What should we start with? Should we start with the Christmas parties?
Yeah, absolutely. So most people know that there's something called vicarious liability, which basically means employers are on the hook. They're responsible for the actions of their employees in the course of their employment, right? Most people know that. So my focus has gone off there for a minute. Can you see me right there? Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, so most people know that, right? And that you're responsible for the course of your employees. What many people may not know is that attending a Christmas party is also in the course of employment. It doesn't mean, course of employment doesn't mean just doing your job 9 to 5. Yeah. It means any activities that you're engaged in as a result of being employed by that company.
Yeah, so, even down to teams going out for drinks on their own, actually.
Precisely what I was going to say. People going out for a drink after work. It's a stretch, and it depends, but it's been organised. There's been cases where they've been organised going down to the pub afterwards for a few drinks. Somebody has sexually harassed somebody else, and the argument was, well, it wasn't in the course of employment, it was in the pub. But the only reason it was down there was because it was arranged at work. So it's really, you've got to be careful. There was another scenario, which I wanted to talk about before we get into the Christmas parties, where there was somebody who had their 40th birthday party. There were about 100 people there, and about 10 of them were employees from the birthday girl's workplace.
Okay.
And what happened was that one of the other employees there sexually harassed another employee. Now, obviously, what the employer argued was, well, hang on, how can that possibly be in the course of employment? It's a birthday party. There's 100 people there. We're like a tenth of that, Yeah. And what the tribunal found was it was a party within a party. So there was a work due within a social function. And that, therefore, it fell within the course of employment, that phrase, right? So it's really, it's important for employers to understand that whatever actions happen at the Christmas party, unless you take certain steps that we're going to talk about, you're on the hook, you're liable for and responsible for the actions of your employees, like a parent is responsible for their child.
Yeah, okay. So I was looking at some of the statistics around Christmas parties, around people's excitement or challenge of attending, and it's not a straightforward thing. I mean, apparently 15% of people actually hate their Christmas party. Hate's a strong word.
Wow, but humbug.
Yeah, I know. 24% don't attend, but not reluctantly. So you've nearly got half the people who might be there not really wanting to be there. And then obviously you've got the other half who go and, well, I won't say half of the other people make a mess of it, but you've also got people within that who are, up to no good and causing more problems than the solutions that this party was supposed to bring.
I'm really surprised about that statistic. I've always loved a good Christmas party when I was an employee and as an employer.
Yeah.
So that's really surprising. But you're right. It's about, look, what most people think is, oh, come on, you know how you're supposed to behave. We're all grown-ups here, aren't you?
Yeah.
Aren't we?
Yeah.
But the reality is that employment law looks at employees without it being patronizing, but as if they're children. And what I mean by that is you as an employer have to demonstrate that you have very, very clearly laid out boundaries of expected behaviors whilst in the course of their employment or what have you.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is the way to be able to be very clear, it might be in a policy document already, don't harass, don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do any harm to say, look, remember it's a Christmas party, enjoy yourselves, but don't do anything silly. Please keep control. Don't have more than so many drinks if you can't control it, because we want it to stay fun, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's okay to almost send a round robin or have a chat, get managers to have a chat with their people before Christmas to say.
Absolutely, and document it that it's been done, because the idea is if you can demonstrate. So if something goes wrong, Meeta, and somebody does harass somebody or does something that's really unpleasant, effectively the employer wants to be able to show that they took all reasonable, practicable steps to prevent that situation from happening. So just saying, oh, isn't it obvious, isn't enough actually in law. It's about spelling it out to them, like in very, very clear Peter and Jane terms.
Sure. So as we sit here today, probably most of the parties will have been done. We're halfway through the month. Everyone's pretty much closing down in, next Friday.
Yes.
What sort of challenges are you seeing or hearing about that have happened or are happening?
To be honest with you, Meeta, nothing at the moment. When I hear them in January. I hear them either after Boxing Day or in that sort of week, because there's still parties happening in the run up to next week, and it doesn't. And also remember, people don't always bring up these things at that time. It might be a week later, or they have time to mull it over. So January, we tend to have a boom of issues that come up. Christmas time's a funny period, and so is the New Year, isn't it? It's looking at resolutions, New Year resolutions. It's being reflective. Do I want to do this job anymore? I don't want to take this anymore. Or let's do this differently this year. Both employers and employees. So actually things are more not run of the mill. There are situations, but in terms of a trend, I think most people are looking at worrying about things to do with recession thing coming up. Potential redundancies, certainly those scenarios are coming up quite a bit. But also we're starting already to get some waves about bullying and harassment in the workplace. That's without the Christmas party. Because again, as I say, December tends to be a time when people start to reflect about, what am I going to stand for? What am I going to put up with? And all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we always say that people people make that choice to go to work at that organization every day. You make that choice daily. And you're absolutely right. We talk a lot about it as well. When people are reflecting in the downtime, they will consider, will I stand for this? Will I reflect on what happened at this Christmas party? Or will I look back at my working environment and people that I work with and accept what actually is making me very uncomfortable? So, yeah, I hear you. So January is when all of these things start to unravel or show themselves.
Yeah, they're kind of enough's enough. They get into New Year resolution mode. And then you're right, that's when they start to show themselves.
And we've got a late comer just announcing, hi, Guy. Thanks for jumping in. We're still getting people in. Please give us your thoughts on the poll, Guy, as well, just so we can see what challenges are being faced in the room. So currently we're looking at finding the right people for your organization, and retaining and motivating people seem to be the two challenges. So Tosh, actually, with Christmas party challenges and bullying and harassment, that is going to feed right into the retention and development of people, isn't it? Because if people feel they're in a hostile environment, they're talking with their feet. They're out the door.
Three biggest problems or challenges that employers face: finding the right people, keeping the right people, and getting rid of the toxic ones.
Yeah.
You get those three things right, you're running your business more like clockwork. But it's difficult because there's so many things that are involved in that, such as business owners recruiting the wrong people, but they've gone through all the process now. So, oh gosh, let's see how it goes. Let's hope something changes rather than getting it right at the beginning. When it's the employees in the workplace, it's what's coming out of my mouth isn't necessarily what you're hearing. So understanding how people receive information, what they're hearing, what registers with them, what fulfills them, what motivates them, and keeping on top of it. Not like it's a job. It should come quite naturally for you because you want to keep them motivated, right? It's not just a tick box exercise.
No, but
the deadwood.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges of the current sort of setup of the working world is that people have been hybrid. There is a lot less day-to-day connectivity and interaction. Therefore, there can be a disconnect, but there can also be misunderstandings. And I think pulling people back in, whether it's work or whether it's socials or whatever it is, I think more conscious effort has to be made by organizations to really define what our working environment should be like and look like.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that comes from the top down.
Yeah, needs to be, and then layered throughout. So senior management, middle management, the team on the ground, and then having feedback all the way up again as well. Really important.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Christmas parties. Let's talk about what the solutions are in this. So come January, employers are going to be getting complaints or scenarios being brought up. What should employers be thinking about on how to handle that?
The first thing I often hear from employers is when they get a grievance is, oh, for God's sake, or, it's the hassle of having to deal with a lot of situations. But what I'm going to suggest is change your view on how you look at a grievance. Assume it's the same as a help me letter. If somebody said to me, can you help me? Are you going to say, oh, for God's sake? I mean, you might do, I suppose, depending who it is. But look at it from that point of view. Assume that the employee is genuine, authentic. They've raised some real concerns, and all you have to do is just address them. Might mean looking into those things, but yes, try and deal with it informally. Try and have an early conversation with the employee, saying, look, where are you wanting to go with this?
Yeah.
Is there another way? Can we maybe meet? Can we have a chat first, informally about it? We don't have to just go down due process. But if that's what the employee wants, you need to do it properly. You need to make sure you're addressing everything correctly, applying the right decision-making process, the legal burden of proof when making decisions. Get some help from us. I'll happily talk you through it. But there's no shortcut apart from the employee and the employee agreeing a quick settlement agreement or a payoff. But that's not the way to do it. It really is, think of it as a help me letter and find out whatever you need to find out to get to the bottom of the situation. Yeah,
it's also could be considered as a feedback letter, right? Employees are always wanting to really understand what people are feeling, what wins are out there, what challenges are out there. Well, these letters are going to really highlight exactly what's not working, and it may bring other people in as well, and it might allow you to do some training for the right reasons, and people will understand it's important. It's going to be.
It's also worth appreciating that by the time they've got to a grievance, they must have gone through quite a bit already. It isn't just like I'm writing a grievance on the first thing. They've probably gone through a bit of a process, right? It's also worth appreciating that, and we're all guilty of it in some form or another, is that by the time they've written the grievance, they've got confirmation bias, which means that they've already got a decision in their mind of what the situation is, and all they're doing is looking for evidence that supports that belief.
Yeah.
Often when I deal with employees in the situation, and I say, well, what would it take for you to go back to work, rather than just, leaving in a court case? No, nothing. I can never go back again. I say, okay, so what if they give you £1 million? Okay, then I'll go back again. All right, so somewhere between £1 and £1 million. So you're not going to get £1 million, but you see my point is, well, let's change the context. What actually realistically needs to change for other solutions? So when you know that they're coming there with confirmation bias and this is my truth, just understand why that is, and then deal with it reasonably, fairly, to come to a right conclusion based on a reasonable investigation, right?
Yeah, I hear you. So when it comes to Christmas parties, step one is prevention. So having a chat, setting the lay of the land, setting the expectations of what good behavior looks like.
Yeah, correct. Expectations. Correct.
Yeah. And then the second, should scenarios arise and grievances occur, then the important thing is to, and I'm just kind of summing it up for myself, but also the audience, because we don't deal with it day in, day out, hopefully, is to have some compassion, but also to look at it as a gift and look at it as you're finding out something about your people and your company, and actually you can create a solution here.
Yeah, exactly right. Don't look at the problem, look at the person and find out what the whole problem is. And look, it really is about having, and I don't mean it patronizingly, grown-up conversations with people. Look, what's going on here? Tell us okay, I've heard all these things. What is it you're looking for to get this resolved? They might say, I want that person fired. I never want to work with them again. Or I want some money. Well, at least you know where they're at. And if one of the solutions is a quick solution that you're prepared to engage in, well, then it's done, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that. And what I would say for anyone watching is that the clarity that we have in this room about and talking about solutions or prevention is all well and good. But when you get into real work scenarios, busy, stressed, and all the rest of it, sometimes you don't necessarily have the headspace to apply best practice. And that's where Tosh comes in.
Yeah, absolutely right. A lot of it is actually, Meeta, isn't just the law, it's about psychology. understanding the way that people tick, what makes them think, what makes them want to behave in a certain way. How do we positively influence them to do what is right in the circumstance? That goes both ways, to the employer and to the employees.
And I think that starts probably for well ahead of where we are today, talking about parties. And actually, it starts with probably another webinar topic, but how you induct people, how you do your profiling and testing of person fit, people fit, strength-based training, understanding what makes people tick. So by the time you get to a grievance, you don't have to get to know them to understand the grievance. You understand the individual. And I think I'm calling it holistic leadership. But actually, I think it's holistic partnership is what it needs to be, from the top down, but in between people as well. So I think businesses have a huge responsibility, not only to understand people, but help people within a team understand each other. Will overcome a lot of misunderstandings.
It is really about communication, and more importantly, it's about effective communication. You get that, you land that right, then you're absolutely on the right path.
Yeah. So we're going to leave that there for now, because I think we could talk about this for the whole session, but we are now going to move forward to talking about flexible working. Now, this actually is a quick, short, sharp shrift, isn't it, Tosh? Because it's a poll that's been put forward, a law. What would you call it? It's a
bill.
It's a bill.
Basically, that was a bill that came out on the 5th of December. It's gone through a number of different stages. It's actually at the committee stage right now, which means they're looking to make some decisions on that. And and we don't have a date for when that will become law, because that hasn't been confirmed yet, but it's very likely to be coming in 2023.
Okay.
And the key issue is, so the current position is this: flexible working. Everyone knows what that means, right? Is it working from home? Is it a hybrid scenario? Is it a change of your hours? How can I work flexibly for whatever reason? The law used to be it was to look after a child up to the age of 6 or up to the age of 18 if the child was disabled. It was no longer about caring for a child. It was just for any reason you like.
Yeah.
What they said is you can make one flexible working request a year, and you had to be employed by the company for at least 6 months before you can make a flexible working request. There's no right of appeal against that flexible working request if it's refused. But most companies do it anyway, just to show that they're fair and reasonable and so forth. Now, it's also important, the current law also says that there are 7 reasons that an employer can refuse a flexible working request. Now, that doesn't, I don't want this to be like a kickstart for everybody to say, all right, let's write these things down. You should always look to see how you make it work. And if you can't make it work, then you fall in these reasons, right? So the first one is extra costs that would damage the business. So if the flexible working request means it's going to cost us more money that is unreasonable in the circumstances, then that's a good reason. The work can't be reorganized among existing staff is the second reason. Third reason, people can't be recruited to do the work. So, for example, if it's a full-time employee and they want to work 3 days a week, well, can we get another one for 2 days a week? So it's the same as one full-time person. The fourth reason is flexible working might affect the quality or performance of whatever the company is doing. Fifth reason is the business won't be able to meet customer demand. So, let's say that they're working 9 to 5 and the flexible working is they want the night shift, if there is such a thing in your business. And we say, well, no, hang on, all the business customers are in the daytime. So that won't work. The next reason is there's a lack of work during the proposed working times, which is kind of the same as the customer demand thing, but it might not be a customer demand thing. Maybe it's just the way that you operate and what work is available or what needs to be done. And the last thing is planned structural changes. So if we're reorganizing the workforce already and there might be some redundancies, flexible working is not necessarily going to fit in that structure. So that's what the current law says, right?
Okay.
What the bill is saying is we're going to scrap the 26 weeks, 6 months. From day one, an employer can make a flexible working request.
Okay.
What does that mean? That means from day one, they can, so imagine you're the employer, you've applied for a full-time job for whatever it is, right? I've applied for a full-time lawyer, 5 days a week. And then I get a lawyer that applies and they say, you know what, can't I do a full 5 days in terms of the hours, so 40 hours, but can't I do it in 4 days?
Okay.
So they're doing the hours. Well, do I really need the Friday? Can I cover it? Remember, can my other staff cover the Friday? Will I still meet all those requirements for the business?
And they can
Them
ask
to think about it.
during the interview process, or are you saying as soon as they've started?
So at the moment, the bill is saying from day one of employment.
Fine. Yeah.
Not from recruitment.
No. And what I would argue about the pre-hiring or the pre-start date is that this is all points of negotiation that would be part of any conversation and interview process. So yeah, that's fine.
Correct.
That doesn't change. From day one, right to the point that an employer could have hired based on 5 days in the office, however it's decided, but they can literally say, from day one, I'd actually like to change my hours.
Correct. They can make a flexible work. It could be. It doesn't need to be changing hours. It could be hybrid working. I want to work from home and I want to work partly in the office.
Yeah.
It can mean all manner of different things. But what it will do is it will help women looking after children, carers, old people, disabled people. And it helps all of them to just stay in employment but still meet the employer's requirements. The idea isn't to just cause problems for employers. It's still going to make it work for them, but it just forces employers to think about, well, actually, let's think of a different way. The very obvious example is COVID. For decades, people were saying you can't work from home. COVID hit, and then we all found out that everybody was lying. And why? Because we were forced to make an adjustment. We were forced to rethink it. So it means from day one, if you don't look at it properly, you could be looking at a sex discrimination claim. You could be looking at a failure to provide a flexible working request, which is worth up to 8 weeks' pay. So there are other claims that will suddenly become relevant from day one if it isn't listened to properly.
Well, I think this is so powerful. And as you said, it's how you frame this and you look at it as an opportunity, which is that in this world of very, high skill shortage, our poll is currently showing that 60% are saying that finding the right people is their biggest concern. Let's open up the pool. Let's think about how to retain people and keep them engaged and motivated. And flexible working is the number one environment where you can actually say, look, we're listening. Let's measure outcomes. Let's look at what good looks like for your individual role requirement. But let's have an overarching sort of people intent that, as an employer, we want to create the best environment, the most successful environment, but also the happiest environment for our people. Something that everyone can look to as that beacon of why employers do things a certain way. And then I think people feel that they trust their employer more to get it right.
I think there's a gap there. Most employers, many clients, and I say, I can't find the right people. I can't find the right people. Well, what does that look like? What are the traits? What are the characteristics? It isn't just the qualification and the job skill. Some things you can teach, actually. So really, it comes down to how are you actually profiling the people that you want to find? And I don't mean race, sex, religion, or any of those sorts of things. Obviously, I mean, what are the characteristics? No point saying go-getter. What does that mean? What are you actually expecting? Because I think what happens is business owners are expecting sometimes people to be people like them, and the employees are
bias right there. Yeah. And there's unconscious bias right there, is that there's this preconception. Some call it stereotyping. We used to talk a lot about stereotypes. They talk about unconscious bias. The same sort of thing is that we make judgments based on all sorts of knowledge and experiences that we've gleaned up to that point, which are then affecting our perception of other people. And people's perception is their reality, or so we think. But it's time to kind of put a break in the mindset, isn't there? And actually,
absolutely. So when I get sometimes, I've had people they're at work and I'm a bit tired, and and I'm not saying that they're not. It's all relative, but but then my mindset is I know my limitations and I exceed them. So when I walk around with that in my head, that's a really different issue, isn't it? I remember you mentioned this with somebody that was working with you once, and they said just one more call, then I'm done. Just one more. But then it didn't end. It's one more, and you go until you're done because there's always more to be done. That attitude is priceless, because that is an unrelenting attitude to meet those obligations and perhaps for progress, development for themselves, to impress their employers, to achieve whatever it is they want to achieve. That's a different kind of person. But at the same time, what do you do with the person where they have restrictions in their life? Maybe they've got 3 kids to look after, and that lady wants to do those sorts of things, but they can't. So now what do we do? So it's very much swings and roundabouts, but let's look at traits. And there was something I read in the E-Myth back in the day. You remember Michael Gerber? And he said that, everyone's looking for extraordinary people, but the reality is most people are ordinary. Yeah. And then what you do is you teach them how to do extraordinary things. Yeah. That's a different way of looking at it, rather than just expecting the extraordinary at the beginning.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Looking at flexible working, looking at unconscious bias, actually it all fits into hiring and retaining the right people. But there's also, I think, what flows throughout that is a trust and confidence, and it flows both ways between employer and employee. So as we're tying up flexible working and now stepping into our final section, which is going to be the unconscious bias challenge, what would you say employers should be doing?
Meeta, but sorry to interrupt you, that there were a couple of other points I just wanted to quickly make about the change in the law.
Oh, yes, please.
I'd only mentioned the one thing, which is the 26 weeks thing. So previously, so currently it's 1 year, 1 request you can make a year. That's going to change to 2 requests a year. Okay. An employer's decision is presently required to be made within 3 months of the flexible working request being made. That's going to be reduced to 2 weeks. Sorry, 2 months. My mistake. 2 months. The compensation is going to be, if you fail to make a reasonable request, just automatically, and it's unreasonable, is 8 weeks pay, which is capped at the statutory rate, which is currently 571. And also what's different is that a tribunal can order an employer to reconsider the request. Now, what does that mean? Hey, think about it again. So they think about it again. If they still refuse and it's not justifiable, it opens up for another tribunal case.
Wow.
So they've really got to justify whatever they're doing or why they're not doing it. Remember, the starting point should always be, how can I make it work? Not how can I not make it work? Because by natural default position, you'll see it works or it doesn't work, or you'll do a trial or what have you. Sorry, I just want to get those extra bits out. That was all.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that because actually it still lends to the question of, if there is trust and confidence in the relationship, in the working relationship between employer and employee, then all of these challenges can be overcome. There can be mistakes, there 100%. Can be reasons, but we can always work through to a solution. And it's establishing how you build trust and confidence, which is do what you say you're going to do, right? And if you're not going to do it, then tell people before, don't just ignore it that it didn't happen. So for an employer sitting there and thinking, right, I want to create environment 2023, I want to start off on real strong trust and confidence with my people, what would you recommend they think about?
So what you've said absolutely hits the nail on the head, and I'm going to put it in a slightly different context. So you're right, it's about that trust and confidence thing. So let's have a quick look. There's 4 claims you can make for a failure to make reasonable requests, right? Just that by itself. There's no claim by itself just because it was rejected. Okay, can't be. It's got to be justified or not justified. Number 1 is they didn't handle it reasonably. Well, if there's trust and confidence and it's dealt with a open heart, open hands, whatever phrase you want to use, that will never be a claim. The second one is where it's they wrongfully treat the application as a withdrawal. How can that possibly happen without there being miscommunication of some sort? And if there was some miscommunication where you thought the employee withdrew it, and then the employee says, I didn't, well, we've taken your letter to say that. It doesn't indicate the right approach. Where they've dismissed or treated the employee poorly for flexible working requests, for example, no promotions, no pay rises, those sorts of things. Again, that comes back to what you said about trust and confidence relationships. Those kinds of relationships will never even envisage these sort of type of scenarios. And the last one is where the application is rejected based on incorrect facts. Well, how can there be incorrect facts unless you haven't investigated it properly or talked to the person properly? I know it's a very unlawyer-like thing to say, Meeta, but I can't stand due process. And the reality should be, let's just talk to each other very openly about the best way forwards. And it's just common sense, isn't it? Have a grown-up conversation. Yeah. And if you really can't, that's why due process is there. And if you look at all the processes that are out there, they're all designed with a view to things ending up in court. What happens if they end up in court? Well, you follow this process. Well, why do we stop thinking about liability, again, very unlawyer-like, and start thinking about how do we make this work? And then if that doesn't work, you're still going to be all right. So that's the approach I believe it should be. So what what should they be doing now is exactly what you said, actually, Meeta, is start to take a real stock of who you are, what you want to do, how you want to be, and take a little inventory of who's on your bus. If we use the old Jim Collins good to great analogy, right? Get the right people on the bus. And what do they look like? How do they operate? How do they think? Some of them might be part-time, some of them might not be, but there's certain traits, or gravitas that will make the difference in your business that the other people who are just kind of passengers aren't really helping with.
So an environment or an organization where they already have their people, revisit your staff handbook, retrain on what's important to you as an organization, talk to people individually about where their challenges are, where their wins are, what they want for the year. Write a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month plan. If you've got your business structured right, then each leader or team leader or manager should have the space and capacity to help each individual on their personal path, their professional path, and some familial flexibility. We are helping them holistically. And if they truly trust that you are delivering that support, then they'll work with you rather than against you on the challenges. Easier said than done, but definitely an ideal that we should all be striving towards. Quick question here from Janice, who asked that if we had touched on when the new flexible working changes might be passed.
So at the moment, Janice, what we said earlier was it's just a bill. We have absolutely no idea. I've got no inside information, but typically, it's given that we're at the committee stage, which means that there's a second reading of everything, gets to a committee to make some decisions. It's very likely we'll possibly be looking at 2023. I would have certainly thought we're looking at 2024, but 2023 does seem likely on the cards. But I'm purely guessing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
We know it's coming.
Pardon?
We know it's coming. We just don't know when.
No, and watch out on our webinars. We'll keep you posted.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so we've only got about 5 minutes, but I know we have a whole session to talk about around unconscious bias. So, Tosh, what would you like to cover on unconscious bias?
Well, I just thought it was you were specifically talking about one situation. I was talking about the Harry and Meghan Netflix program, which maybe you've seen. Have you seen it?
The first 2 or 3, yeah. The first 3.
Yeah. So, and the idea was there was unconscious bias within the royal family, right? In the way, and the specific unconscious bias relating to Meghan Markle being black.
Yeah.
And there's two schools of thoughts about it. I'll tell you mine if you ask me. And one is if you look, it's confirmation bias. We mentioned this earlier. If you think about something and look enough for those factors in there, I'm sure you'll find them. But then there are other factors at play as well, isn't it? In that particular scenario. There's comparisons being made between Meghan and Kate, for example, how they conduct themselves, the language that they use. At the same time, is that the language that they use? Is it the way the media is portraying it? What are we actually seeing it? So there's so many different factors at play there. But unconscious bias, to avoid unconscious bias in the workplace, in your life, you need to exercise some form of self-awareness. That takes a while to get to. I don't know if that comes with maturity or some sort of aha moment. I'd be interested to see what your take is on that, Meeta. But the self-awareness is what avoids unconscious bias, or being conscious of your bias and then overcoming it because you're conscious of it. So
where Harry is, if you're looking at sort of bringing this back to Prince Harry versus the lady that was let go from her job in Buckingham Palace, he has now an awareness because it's been brought to light by the situation that his wife has been up against, that he's now checking himself before he responds because he understands that his reactions are loaded based on his experiences and therefore won't always produce the best and fairest outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, there may be something to it. I'm just open to the fact that there may not be. It may be a personality issue. If she was not black, if she was English with the same characteristics, would there still be issues that would be potentially raised? I mean, that's what happened with Fergie, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that wasn't race, that was just personality. But what I would say, again, if we're talking about unconscious bias, is that you can have personality issues, but if there is race involved, then it can be exacerbated because it's a much easier target for people.
There's no doubt. No doubt. I'm just suggesting the race card, or in these situations, shouldn't be the first go-to place. You can imagine I often get situations with cases where people may say something like, I'm being treated in a certain way, and I think it might be my race.
Yeah.
Why? Or maybe because I'm the only person of that ethnic minority in the workplace. Well, you might be right. You might be. But that itself isn't enough. You know, that a racist person isn't always racist, for example. So if you meet somebody of a member of the BNP, that they may be actively promoting racism within the UK, you might meet them as an individual and they won't be racist in front of you. So you can't just join the dots to just say they're like that in every single scenario that applies. We've got to be clear that we're not everybody's just one thing all the time. We're many things.
What I would say about unconscious bias is the self-awareness is the number one important process I think that every individual should go through. And actually, unconscious bias isn't something that sits in people of no color, of white people. It actually sits in people of color as well. And so we all must reflect and be more self-aware. And I think the way an employer can help with that, and it's certainly something that we do on our training side of the business, is doing unconscious bias training, which is understanding what you bring to the table and how that might impact your expectation or impression of other people. So I think what it's about, as you said, it's not just about having that aha moment. I think it's about education, and I think it's about self-reflection, but that isn't, again, something you can do passively. I think it has to be a really proactive effort. And I think for employers to make that available to their employees, I think is a huge gift, not only to the individual, but back to your business, because you will benefit from having people that have been through that process and are so much more self-aware.
You know, I was thinking about this with mums at schools. So, you know, what if we have to do something, it's mainly mums, right? But as parents, do we exercise an unconscious bias or a conscious bias towards our kids? Probably both. You know, should everything be fair and equal and balanced? You take a view on these things in terms of how you want to conduct yourselves and how you want to raise your kids and what advantages you do or don't want to give. My point being that we're all guilty of it in one way or another. Just make sure you're not guilty of it in a workplace environment or in a situation where it is something that is clearly unlawful or unfair or not reasonable. And that's certainly when it comes to based on sex, race, religion, disability, all those protected characteristics, right?
Indeed. And again, coming back to the argument of, or just the facts that attracting and retaining people is the biggest challenge for people, business owners, people leaders, really thinking about the impact that the organization has on its people and their experience of working for your organization. You can overcome all of this by having some really good training in place, some coaching. Our webinars offer that. So even if you want to offer a freebie and say, I haven't got money to invest, we will be running, Tosh, I definitely think you and I need to have a whole session around unconscious bias, and we'll do specific training programs as well. So watch this space for more in this space, but if otherwise, you know, reach out to us afterwards. But there's so much out there. It's not even a plug for us. It's about get active and start looking at solutions. And I promise we'll bring more of those in 2023 as well.
Absolutely.
So Tosh, listen, I know we had a lot more to discuss in the final topic, but we will bring this back next time you and I sit, which hopefully will be January. But in the meantime, I think we're going to have to tie things up for today. Just want to say thank you to everyone for submitting your thoughts in the poll. So the top concern and challenge was finding the right people for your organization. And the next two equally important ones were retaining and motivating your people and engagement and productivity, which kind of go hand in hand, because if they're engaged and productive, then you're going to be retaining them. So lots of challenges, but also lots of solutions from us out to you in the new year. But in the meantime, thank you so much, everyone. And Tosh, thank you so much for being our guest here today.
Thanks a lot, Meeta. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll see you all on the other side.
Absolutely. Wishing everyone happy holidays. All the best.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.